So we took a family vacation to Colorado this past summer, and one of the days, me, Shelly, and Evan, we were walking around this beautiful lake surrounded by some mountains, and I was looking around at the beauty of everything, and when I did, I noticed something kind of off to my right, really high near the top of these two mountains, and so it was kind of hard to see because it was so high, so I got my binoculars out, and I was looking, and I noticed this cable that was between these two mountain peaks. Again, super high up there. Then I saw two people up there on these cables, and they were taking turns walking in between these two mountain peaks on this particular cable, all right? And there was no safety net below them. Okay, this is just in the wild mountains of Colorado. And I don't know if maybe they were connected somehow to the cable, so if they slipped and fell, they would be, caught and they could pull themselves up. I don't know all those kind of details because I couldn't see because we were so far away, but I know there was a cable. I know they were walking on that particular cable, and I realized that every step they took had to be carefully aligned with one another up there so high without that safety net. I mean, like a small misstep, they could fall. It could potentially be over if they weren't hooked up, some other way. But they had to put one foot in front of the other. Couldn't be in the wrong direction, or the wind. Hopefully the wind wasn't going to blow too bad when they were up there. But they had to be very intentional with every single step. How many of you would want to do that if you had the chance? We have like maybe 2 or 3 people raising their hand, maybe 4 at the most. How many of you are like, I'm good on the ground? Like, I'm good on the ground, I'm with you on that, would not want to do something like that, okay? I'm with you on the ground. And just like every step of those, I'll call them tightrope walkers. That's what they look like to me. Like every step of those tightrope walkers had to be perfectly aligned with the cable. That really paints a picture of how our daily choices need to be aligned with our faith. And we're going to talk about this idea today, all right, of how the resurrection of Jesus compels me to align my daily choices with my faith, okay? Compels me to align my daily choices with my faith. Because we're in a series called Resurrection. We've talked about some things like, hey, did Jesus really rise from the dead? And how can I know this really happened? And then why is that such a big deal? And then what does this mean for my future? Today we're really talking about what does this mean to me now, right? What does it mean to me now? Because we're talking about how the resurrection of Jesus compels me to align my daily choices with my faith. Like, you mean like the resurrection of Jesus impacts what I do every day? Yes. That's how relevant it is to your life. Just turn to somebody and say, this is relevant stuff. Come on, turn to somebody and say that. So we're on a spiritual journey through the book of 1 Corinthians. We've arrived at chapter 15, verse 29, and it says this. We're going to read what it says. It says, otherwise, what will they do who are being baptized for the dead? If the dead are not raised at all, then why are people baptized for them? Why are we in danger every hour? I face death every day. As surely as I may boast about you, brothers and sisters, in Christ Jesus our Lord. If I fought wild beasts in Ephesus as a mere man, what good did that do? What good did that do me? If the dead are not raised, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals. Come to your senses and stop sinning. For some people are ignorant about God. They just don't know about God. And I say this to your shame. He's talking to a group of people, the church in the city of Corinth. So Paul starts out this passage by referring to this pagan custom where people are baptized on behalf of those who are already died. It's like a superstitious kind of practice. It's not biblical. He's not condoning that, okay? He's not approving that custom. He's just simply kind of using it as an argument from culture to say, look, if there were no resurrection from the dead, then why would this custom even exist in the culture? His point was people who don't follow Jesus even believe in the resurrection because they have this bizarre practice where they baptize people on behalf of the dead, believing they're going to someday get resurrected. So if unbelievers have enough sense to believe in the resurrection, then why aren't some people in the church in Corinth not believing in the resurrection? That's Paul's point with this. And Paul basically used that as a starting point to talk about how the resurrection of Jesus compels me to align my daily choices with my faith. And we're going to talk about 3 ways. Everybody say 3 ways. 3 ways we can align our daily choices with our faith because of the resurrection of Jesus. The first way is this. We can do that through our daily practices, okay? Through our daily practices. And the part of the scripture here we're going to look at is, he said, why are we in danger every hour? I face death every day. As surely as I may boast about you, brothers and sisters in Christ Jesus our Lord. If I fought wild beasts in Ephesus as a mere man, what good did that do me? So he's saying, here, I face danger every day, every hour. That's what he says in these verses. Well, Paul was probably referring to a situation when 40 men took a vow they would not eat or drink until they killed Paul. Okay? Now, with enemies like that, no wonder he's in danger every hour. Okay, that's a pretty bad situation. And then he talked about fighting wild beasts in the city of Ephesus. He's referring to a time when he was preaching the gospel in Ephesus, and it caused this uproar to happen in the city. And people in the city, they became wild and violent towards Paul and the people he was traveling with. So as we look at this, why would anybody want to allow themselves to be in dangerous situations for preaching the gospel? Like, why wouldn't Paul just stop and do something else? Get a day job, dude. There's other things you can do that's a little bit safer or a lot safer than preaching the gospel when your life is currently on the line. He was a tent maker. He knew how to do stuff like that. He had a kind of a side business. Go do that, Paul. Maybe make that your full-time gig, right? It's a whole lot safer. But why did he keep preaching the gospel in the middle of all this danger? Because the resurrection causes him to align his daily choices with his faith. And it was worth taking the risks with his life because he said, because of the resurrection, it's worth it. Because what he was doing, preaching the gospel, impacted people's eternities, and therefore Paul could live on the edge of death because that was better than just trying to play it safe. He wanted his life to count. He wanted it to matter. You see, he had the ultimate finish line in mind when he lived every day. I mean, think about it. When a professional athlete, when they're training for a race, okay, every training day is informed by the goal of reaching the finish line before anybody else reaches the finish line. I mean, that athlete trains with the finish line in mind. The finish line motivates that professional athlete. And it dictates every training decision and how they approach each day. They're willing to push themselves and go beyond what they believe is humanly possible. Right? And they're willing to bring their bodies to the brink of what would be considered extreme. And then maybe even push those boundaries even more. Why do they do that? Because of the finish line. And they create daily practices, daily routines that guide their training and inform their lives. Why? Because they train, they live, they approach each day with the finish line in mind. And this is how Paul lived. This is how he approached each day. He was willing to face danger. He was willing to take risks. He was willing to preach the gospel at all costs. Why? Because he had the ultimate finish line in mind. He knew that what he was doing was making a difference in people's eternities. Okay? Between them going from hell to they could go to heaven if they came to know Jesus. That's how big of a deal it was. It was a difference between being with Jesus or separated from Jesus for eternity. All made possible because of the resurrection of Jesus. So how can we align our daily practices with our faith because of the resurrection? Charles Spurgeon, who was a preacher in the 1800s, he gave some great suggestions for doing this. So I'll just summarize some of his concepts he talked about. I threw in some of my own as well. We're going to go through these real quick, but here's how we can align our daily practices with our faith because of the resurrection. The first one is this: we remember the certainty of death. Remember the certainty of death, okay? You've probably heard this phrase before. There's 2 things that are guaranteed in life. Now, there could be more than that, but I'm just quoting the phrase, okay? 2 things that are guaranteed in life: taxes and death. Okay? Maybe you've heard that before. And what does this phrase mean? It means that as long as you're alive, you're going to pay taxes, or you're going to go to jail. So you're going to pay taxes, okay? We got to pay taxes. And the other certainty here is death. We're all guaranteed to die unless Jesus comes back before that time. So what if we live each day with the sobering truth that death on this earth is certain? Nobody can escape it. Doesn't matter how much money you have. Nothing good enough you can do can cause you to escape death. We are all destined to die one day unless Jesus comes back first. But if we keep that reality, if we have that reality with us, it can inform our daily choices and help them to align better with our faith. We can make each day count to the fullest. Why? Because we realize that life on this earth is temporary. It's super temporary. So am I putting off till tomorrow what could really benefit me or somebody else if I did it today? You see, live life to the fullest because we don't know if our tomorrow on earth will actually come. We can live like that. Another thing we can do is hold on to things loosely. Hold on to things loosely. Now, we can't take anything from this earth into eternity except other people. So don't get too wrapped up, okay, on what you have and what you see and your resources and your possessions. I mean, so many people, they're living for, for the right kind of house. They're living for, maybe a new car or a certain kind of car. They're living for the next tech gadget or whatever it is. They're living for this next and greatest thing. But you know what? None of those things are going to go with us into eternity. They're just not. No matter how much how much you pile up, no matter how much you store away, no matter how much you invest, no matter how much you accumulate, guess what? It's going to stay right here. It's not going with you into eternity. And this really challenges us with the question, what am I really living my life for right now? What am I living for? Something we got to be aware of each and every day. The third thing we can do is acknowledge our need of Jesus. Okay, I want to make this practical for us. We can acknowledge our need of Jesus. We got to lean on Jesus 100% every day, no matter how good things are or how bad things are. Okay, no matter how easy things may seem at the moment or maybe how challenging things may be with what we're currently walking through. We got to lean on Jesus the same amount each day. Let's make our pursuit of Jesus the same, super strong, every single day of our lives. So are we pursuing Jesus equally when we're in a mess, just as much as we are when things almost seem perfectly in our life? Does our prayer life reflect that? Does our Bible reading reflect that? Does our church attendance reflect that? Why am I saying those things? Those are the things that facilitate our relationship with Him. An acknowledgement that, man, I need Jesus. I need Him big time every day. Another thing we can do is live with no regrets. This is interesting. I've seen this time and time again. And that people who are nearing the end of their lives, they often express regret for things they did not do in life. More so than they express regret over the things they did in life. So most of the regret is over stuff they did not do. See, those are opportunities that were missed, or maybe opportunities that were never materialized. So let's live life seizing opportunities instead of regretting that we didn't. Okay? And then there's a different kind of regret as well, though. There's a regret of things we did because we were being short. We're regretting what we did in the moment because we're being short-sighted and we're not thinking about the future impact of those decisions. Ever done that before? When we make decisions today, think about the impact of those decisions 5 years down the road. So don't just get in a moment. Oftentimes we're just like, well, I want to do this right now. Oh, it feels good. It pleases me. I'm just going to do this right now. And we don't think about the impact of that decision and that choice 5 years down the road. So let me give us something that's real practical that can help you. Ask yourself this question. Will I regret this decision 5 years from now, or will I celebrate this decision 5 years from now? Ask yourself that question. Before you make that purchase, before you make that investment, before you make that choice, before you could apply this to almost everything. Will I be glad I made this decision 5 years from now, or will I regret that decision 5 years from now? This is about living with the bigger picture in mind. We can do this every single day with the decisions that we face. The next one is this. So we live with no regrets. We also want to have our life in order. Have our life in order. Paul said this in verse 34, come to your senses and stop sinning, for some people are ignorant about God, and I say this to your shame. See, Paul One thing I like about Paul, he shot straight, just a straight shooter, just telling it like it is. And I think we can benefit from that kind of communication. He said, "Come to your senses and stop sinning." You see, when we sin, we're disobeying God. That's what sin is. It's disobedience to God. And when we live this way, guess what? Our life is out of order. It's not functioning the way God designed for it to function. And that's why Paul said, "Come to your senses and stop sinning." So many people are walking around with their lives out of order. You know, when I think of this idea of being out of order, I think of a kid when I used to go to like a pop machine or a Coke machine or a soda machine, and I'd have some change, and I'd put it in there, and then sometimes, you know, like the product wouldn't come out, and then I realized at that moment it was out of order. And I wanted to kick the machine and shake the machine. Come on, don't be looking at me like that. You know you've done that too. How many of you have ever, I won't even ask that. Put the money in there, then I realize it's out of order. I didn't get my product, then I lost my money, it's gone. Or maybe I go by the machine sometimes, I see the sign on there, it says out of order. But this is the way most people live their lives. They're living their life out of order. And one of the reasons I believe that Paul used the phrase "come to your senses" is because we often excuse ourselves from the reality of sin. We give ourselves a free pass on sin. And we justify why we're not obeying God in certain areas of our life. But what we end up doing is when we do that, we're living out of order. Like we can do this by choosing not to live in purity according to what the Bible says. And we can make all kinds of excuses. Well, it's just not practical for me right now. Or I'm in a difficult situation, I'm really stressed out, and we're giving ourselves a pass on that, a way out of that, but it's really sin, Paul is saying, and we're living out of order when we do that. Or we can do that in regards to the way we steward our finances. We can say, I'm not going to tithe right now and obey God by giving the first 10% of my income to Him because my finances are stressed right now, and we give ourselves a free pass, and we come up with all these different things, and when we do that, we're actually living out of order in that area of our life. Or we say, I'm going to shade the truth in this particular situation because I got to get by. There's just something I really need, and I think if I shade the truth, tell a little lie here and there, I can get ahead in this situation. So we give ourselves a free pass with that, but when we do, we're living out of order. Got that sign on our pop machine, we're out of order. Or we're like, you know what, I'm going to gossip just a little bit because I tell you what that person did was unbelievable. So if I gossip just a little bit, surely that can't be that big of a deal because what they did was a big deal. We give ourselves a free pass. But what we're doing is we're living out of order. So Paul's basically saying, hey, come to your senses. Don't give yourself a free pass. Let's stop sinning. And then the other way we can practically apply this is to invest in what will live long after you do. What will live long after you do? People, relationships, sharing Jesus with others. You volunteering, making a difference in people's lives. We have opportunities right here at Reach Church to do that, and in Dream Center Des Moines. Our giving can make a difference long after we're around. That's why we have things like Global Impact, which is our missions efforts here and all around the world. Boy, that can just make an impact for eternity in people's lives. So these are ways, some daily practices we can engage in to align our daily choices with our faith. The second way we can do this, that we can align our daily choices with our faith, number 2, is daily accountability. So we have daily practices and we have daily accountability. Everybody say accountability. Paul says in verse 32, he says, if the dead are not raised, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. You know, when people lose a healthy focus of the resurrection, and it may not even be that we fail to believe it. We may believe in the resurrection, but if we lose a healthy focus on the resurrection, then we start to live a consumer Christian faith kind of life. Life becomes more about us and our own pleasures or our desires more than anything else. And this is a message we get from our culture all the time. We're bombarded with this message. Our culture tells us, hey, you should just live to please yourself. They basically tell us happiness, is the greatest achievement in life. But all those things are false. They communicate that to us, but that's false. We can end up even having this consumer Christian mentality when we approach church. we can start thinking that church is about us more than the worship of Jesus. I've seen this happen in different places. We can start thinking that church is about our opinions, our preferences, our styles, our desires, our songs. And we forget that it's about Him. And all of a sudden, we start placing a higher priority on our personal Christian pleasures than we do on pleasing God. And we start worshiping our preferences instead of worshiping Him. And when we do that, we have fallen into the trap. Ultimately, that perspective is rooted in a deeper issue that basically says, well, we should all just kind of eat and drink all we want because we're going to die anyhow. So everything should be about me, my preferences, the way I view it, the way I want it, and da-da-da-da-da. And it can just enter into every avenue of our life, including church. Like people, it's possible that some people leave church and go, well, I wish we'd have sung this song. I wish we'd be doing this. I can't believe this didn't happen. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And what's happening is we're saying it's all about me and not about Him. We can lose the focus of it all. And we fall into this trap. It's really about who we're trying to primarily please. The ancient Egyptians, they had this bizarre practice, this unique practice. At the end of a big banquet, they would often take the image of a wooden man in a coffin, and they would walk around to make sure each table saw it. Each person could kind of get a view of this. Then they would tell people, hey, you need to have a good time now because you will be dead sooner than you think. And you're going to be just like that person in the coffin that you just saw. So you may as well do as much as you can right now to enjoy yourself. That was their message. That was their messaging. Their philosophy was party up. Live however you want to live. Do whatever you want to do. Do whatever makes you feel good in the moment. Live to please yourself. Live for pleasure. Live for thrills. That was their message. But you know what's so interesting? When we try to live that way, we always end up more miserable. That's the irony of the situation. I think back to the story of Nick B. He shared his story in a video on Easter Sunday. Part of his story that he was living selfishly before he met Jesus. Those are his words. He said he was living selfishly before he came to Jesus. He was trying to do everything he could to please himself without thinking much about anybody else. And then Nick basically said this in his video story. He said, ironically, things started to get much worse. I became more miserable instead of being more fulfilled. Why? Because that's always the end result of what happens when we lose focus on the resurrection and we just start living to please ourselves. But when he met Jesus, everything changed. Everything changed. Yeah. Why? Because there was this new accountability in his life. When there's no focus on the resurrection of Jesus, then there's no element of accountability for our lives. Because if there's no resurrection, then there's no future judgment to consider. And if we put both of those things out of our mind, then we lose the accountability of it all. But when we live with the realization of the resurrection of Jesus every day, it introduces a brand new awareness of accountability. Because then we're reminded that because of the resurrection, all of us are going to stand before God one day and give an account of the lives we lived here on the earth. And those who live their lives investing in something greater than their own pleasure or the pleasure of the moment, well, they're going to receive eternal rewards. Man, that's what I want with my life. But those who just live for the moment or just live to please themselves, even if they did it from a consumer Christian perspective, or maybe they did it from a big time, they're far away from Jesus perspective. Either way, they're going to miss out on the eternal rewards. They may escape hell if they've accepted Jesus and they're just living to be a consumer kind of Christian. Yeah, you may escape hell in that situation, but you'll end up in heaven with not much to show for your life here on the earth. I don't want that. I don't think you want that either. That's what will happen if we don't live with daily accountability that comes from a healthy focus on the resurrection. Because the healthy focus on the resurrection helps me to be accountable for my daily choices in a way that produces eternal rewards for the future. And it helps me to live with an awareness that there's so much more to our existence than what we're experiencing right now on the earth. And when we begin to invest in things that really matter, something far beyond ourselves and selfish living, that's when it all comes to the right place. Are you living with the accountability that comes with a life that's focused on the resurrection of Jesus? That's the question. So we looked at daily practices, daily accountability. Now the third and final way we can align our daily choices with our faith, all compelled by the resurrection of Jesus. Number 3, it's our daily influence. Everybody say influence. In verse 33, Paul says, "Do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals." In many ways, Paul was saying that wrong beliefs, in this case it was wrong beliefs about the resurrection or not giving enough thought to the resurrection in our daily lives, often leads to bad influences. Now, in the Corinthian church, it seems there were some people who started to deny the resurrection, and it led to influences and relationships that were corrupting their morals. Even when we de-emphasize the resurrection, it leads to influences and relationships that invade our morals. The truth is, all of us are impacted by the influences that we're surrounded with on a daily basis. And a lot of times we choose our surroundings on a daily basis. And in many ways, it reminds me of a sponge because we're all kind of like this sponge. Throughout the day, we soak up influences, just like this sponge soaks up water. We're all soaking up things. We're soaking up the influences around us. And so if you spend your time near the influence of spring water, clear water, purified water, then that's what the sponge is going to be soaked up and filled with, right? It's going to have pure water when you squeeze it. It's going to have spring water when you squeeze it. But if you spend your time around muddy water, discolored, polluted water with floaties in it, all kinds of nasty stuff, then that's what the sponge is going to be filled with. It's going to soak up all that junk. We absorb daily influences just like a sponge surrounds or absorbs water that it's surrounded by. You and I are like that on a daily basis. So what type of water or influences are you soaking up in your life? You know, think about the many people at Reach Church who have recently given their lives to Jesus. It's awesome. It's wonderful. We celebrate that. We're super excited. And we might have mentioned this a week or two ago, but we've had almost 70 people water baptized just since January. Isn't that incredible? It's amazing. We celebrate that. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. And we also know that to keep your faith growing in the right direction, you've got to surround yourself with the right influences so you can soak up those things that will supercharge your faith. Like, you know, once you come to know Jesus, you got to do that. Because if you just go back to the way things used to be, hanging with the same people maybe you used to hang with, doing the same things you did before you came to know Jesus, well, then it's going to corrupt your life. It's going to sidetrack you, and you're going to soak up all these negative things that's going to cause your sponge to be polluted and dirty. So you're going to need to surround yourself with some different influences. This is one of the reasons why we have something called Belong on Wednesday nights. There's a couple different components to Belong. One of the components is discipleship. Let's not put that up there yet. We're not on that part. I'll get there in a second. But one of the components of Belong is discipleship. Okay? This is where we talk about core truths in the Scripture and how it applies to your life. So we encourage you to come to that because you can soak up the right kind of influences. And then we have our services on Sunday morning. Another place we want you to prioritize to come and attend because you're going to soak up the right kind of influences from your life, all right? And you need to surround yourself with godly influences so you can grow your faith and soak up the right kind of things. And then for those of us who are followers of Jesus, okay, there's something here for us as well that I want us to understand about our influences because some of us as believers, some believers need to intentionally surround themselves with influences that will challenge their faith in greater capacities. Because I'm also aware that with many believers, you need to surround yourself with some unbelievers. because your only company is with people who are following Jesus. And you're living in a bubble world. And God never called us to live in a bubble world. How are we going to be a light, an influence, and share the gospel if the only people in our life are believers? That's not how we're called to live. If our only company and influences are with believers, then there's a different kind of corruption happening in our life. There's a different kind of pollution happening in our life. We are actually becoming stale in our faith. It's kind of like food or leftovers hanging out in the refrigerator too long. You ever done that? You realized, oh man, I had this hamburger meat, or I had this spaghetti, or I had this chicken, or whatever it is, and you go to open it up, and when you open it up, the smell almost knocks you out. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's been in there way too long. What's happened? It's moldy, it's crusty, it's stinky, and nobody's going to eat that, right? Anybody ever done that before? I have. Okay, what's wrong with it? It wasn't used in a timely way. Our faith is meant to be used in a timely way. Our faith is meant to be used and shared on a daily basis. Why? Because the resurrection of Jesus compels me to align my daily choices with my faith. You see, the resurrection actually compels us to live a life of sharing the gospel. And if we aren't actually sharing the gospel with people in our everyday lives, we may be a believer, but we're moldy, crusty, and stinky with our faith. The only way you solve that problem is to use your faith and start sharing your faith on a regular basis. It's the only way. So, the other reason that we have Belong on Wednesday nights, and now we can put that slide up there. The other reason we have Belong on Wednesday nights, one component, discipleship for new believers. The other component involves a different group of people who go out and share the gospel with people for about 1 hour. That's awesome. 2 different components. And with this, we've been having 2, 3, or maybe 4 people participating with this on a weekly basis. And over the past several weeks, just with 2, 3, or 4 people participating, we've seen about 15 people pray to receive Jesus in their life during those moments. That's wonderful. But I want you to imagine with me if like 200 people were doing that on a Wednesday night here at Belong. Not just 2, 3, or 4. What about 200? We're there, coming, and just for an hour, just sharing our faith. We would literally have hundreds, maybe even more, people coming to know Jesus outside the church and sharing the good news. The gospel's good news. The good news of the gospel. This is actually how God has called us to redig the well of love for the lost at Reach Church. For those who have been around for a couple months, you've heard me share that vision. God's called us to redig the well of love for the lost at Reach Church. This is how we're doing it. We know this is not going to happen accidentally or just us hoping it will happen. We've got to be intentional about it happening. And this is how we're doing it, Reach Church. Now, in a church our size, I'd like to see 200 people coming out to this on a Wednesday night. Right here. Just show up, 6:15, in the prayer room. You don't have to commit to this every week. Here's my ask for you. Would you just commit to Belong once a month from now through the end of summer? That's just like 4 times. Everybody say 4 times. That's hardly at all. Just once a month between now and the end of summer. Okay? Probably all of us could do that. And this is how we're going to fulfill God's call on Reach Church to see people come to know Jesus. Show up at 6:15 in the prayer room. We'll pray for a little bit, and then we'll just train you real quick on how to share the gospel. So please scan that QR code. Scan that QR code. Let us know that you're going to be one of these people who are going to do this once a month just through the end of summer. Something so simple. We'll train you and how to share the gospel with somebody in just like 90 seconds. Okay, it's simple. It's simple, it's done in a natural way, not in a weird way, and this is something that you can do. You can do this. And I believe it's important. You might be wondering, well, Pastor Cullen, what are you doing? Well, it's important for me to lead the way with doing this, so I just want to be transparent and let you know what I've been doing personally with this, because you're probably wondering, all right? Well, since the middle of February, I've shared the gospel with so many people in one-on-one conversations outside the church that I've lost count. So many times, I'm leading the way with this. And I've actually prayed with at least 7 people since that time to be born again and to receive Jesus in their life in one-on-one conversations outside the church. Just over the past 2.5 months. Okay? And then just this past week, I shared the gospel with 2 different people, brought them to a place of decision to receive Jesus. Both of them said they did not want to receive Jesus. They did not want to pray to be born again. But I gave them the opportunities, and that's what matters. So I'm just being transparent, just sharing with you what I'm doing. So I'm telling you this so you know that I'm leading the way, and I'm asking you to join me on this journey. A lot of the Connect groups are wrapping up for the summertime, so this is a great thing to do on a Wednesday. I'm calling our church to do this. And guess what? You'll actually love it because it's what all believers were created to do. It'll actually change your life forever, but most importantly, it will change other people's lives for eternity. And that's what we're called to do. So would you please scan that QR code? Let us know that you'll participate with Belong just once a month through the end of summer. And this is how we're going to redig the wells of love for the lost at Reach Church. Let's have 200 people show up at Belong, 6:15 in the prayer room. This is a necessary part of being a follower of Jesus. It keeps us from growing stale, moldy, and crusty with our faith. And the resurrection of Jesus actually compels us to do this. And this is the perfect place for you to engage in this practice right here at something called Belong. So to kind of recap what we talked about today, the resurrection of Jesus compels me to align my daily choices with my faith, which includes daily practices, daily accountability, and daily influences. Let's all stand to our feet today.